Dr. Maya Johnson, a highly respected doctor, sat quietly in her seat on the plane, her mind focused on the upcoming medical conference she was about to attend. She was known for her hard work and dedication, having saved countless lives and worked in some of the most difficult medical situations. Today, though, she just wanted to relax and enjoy the peaceful flight. She was looking forward to sharing her research with other doctors, learning from them, and perhaps even making some new connections. Maya was dressed simply, in a professional yet comfortable outfit. Her medical bag, which always traveled with her, was stowed carefully at her feet. She looked out of the window as the plane took off, her thoughts drifting to the important work she had ahead. Her career had taken years of dedication, sacrifice, and hard work, but she was proud of what she had achieved. Despite the respect she earned, Maya often preferred to remain humble, always striving to be kind to others, no matter their background or position. Across the aisle, in first class, was Jason Reed, the CEO of a successful tech company. His expensive suit, polished shoes, and the confident air around him were hard to miss. He leaned back in his seat with a smug look on his face, clearly enjoying the luxury that came with his position. He looked at Maya for a moment, then quickly turned his attention back to his phone. Jason was a man used to getting what he wanted, and his wealth and power gave him a sense of superiority over others. As the flight went on, Maya noticed Jason's loud conversation with the flight attendants. He was making demands and speaking to them with a level of disrespect that made Maya uncomfortable. She turned her attention back to her notes, trying to ignore the unsettling scene in front of her. But things took an unexpected turn when the elderly woman sitting a few rows ahead of Maya suddenly collapsed in her seat, causing a panic to spread through the cabin. The flight attendants rushed over, trying to help, but there was clear confusion about what to do. The woman was unconscious, and time was ticking. Maya quickly stood up, instinctively knowing that someone needed to take charge of the situation. She reached for her medical bag and approached the flight attendants. "I'm a doctor. I can help," she said, her voice calm and steady. She knew that when someone's life was at risk, there was no time to hesitate. But before she could take another step, Jason Reed turned in his seat and looked at her with a raised eyebrow. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You're a doctor." He paused, as if the idea was absurd. "I didn't know they let anyone onto planes these days." His tone was dismissive, almost mocking. Maya's eyes widened for a second, but she didn't let his words faze her. She had dealt with prejudice before, and she wasn't going to let it stop her from helping this woman. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I'm a doctor. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to help her." Jason crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. "Well, I'm sure you'll do your best, but I doubt you're qualified to handle this. Let's call someone else," he said, almost arrogantly. Maya was taken aback by his comment, but she kept her focus on the woman. There was no time to argue. "I'm the doctor here," Maya said calmly. "Please step aside." With that, she turned to the flight attendants, who hesitated for a moment before stepping back, clearly relieved that Maya had taken charge. As Maya began assessing the elderly woman's condition, she couldn't help but feel a rush of determination. She knew that every second mattered, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially someone like Jason, distract her from saving a life. The elderly woman's condition grew worse as Maya worked quickly to assess her. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin had turned pale. The flight attendant stood nearby, looking uncertain. Maya didn't waste any time. She immediately began applying the necessary techniques to stabilize the woman. The small airplane cabin felt smaller with each passing second. The soft hum of the plane was drowned out by the rush of thoughts in Maya's mind. She had handled countless emergencies before, but there was something about this moment, the pressure of the situation, the watchful eyes of the passengers, that made it different. "Do we have any oxygen masks on board?" Maya asked one of the flight attendants, her voice calm but firm. The attendant, a young woman, quickly nodded. "Yes, doctor. "I'll get them right away," she said, rushing to the overhead bins. Maya didn't wait for the attendant to return. She continued to check the woman's pulse, her hands moving with practiced ease. "Stay with me," she whispered softly to the patient, hoping her voice would provide some comfort. As she worked, she could feel Jason Reed's eyes on her. His earlier words echoed in her mind. "I doubt you're qualified to handle this." She ignored him, but the harshness of his tone lingered. Why was he acting this way? She had never encountered someone so dismissive when lives were at stake. She had spent years training to help people like the woman lying before her, and yet here was a man who seemed more concerned with questioning her abilities than with the woman's life. Jason leaned back in his seat, clearly irritated. "This is ridiculous," he muttered loud enough for several nearby passengers to hear. "A doctor just happens to be sitting in economy class." Maya could feel the sting of his words, but she refused to let it distract her. The woman was still breathing, but it wasn't enough. The oxygen masks would help, but they wouldn't fix everything. Maya needed to keep her calm. Every action she took now could make the difference between life and death. The attendant returned with the oxygen mask, but just as she was about to apply it to the patient, Jason spoke again. "What are you even doing? You're wasting your time. She probably needs a real doctor, not someone who thinks they can just step in." The flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. But Maya, still focused on her work, ignored him completely. This wasn't the time for a debate. She didn't need approval from anyone, especially not from someone like Jason. "Just leave it to me," Maya said firmly, her voice steady and professional. "I got this." The oxygen mask went over the woman's face, and slowly, Maya could see signs of improvement. The woman's skin regained some color, and her breathing became a little steadier. The situation wasn't over yet, but it was clear that Maya was making progress. As the flight attendants continued to assist, the other passengers began to whisper among themselves, their eyes fixed on the woman and Maya. Jason, for the first time since the emergency began, fell silent. His earlier mocking expressions were replaced by a frown, and he seemed unsure of how to respond. Maya didn't care about his opinion. What mattered now was the woman's recovery. She had a job to do, and she would do it to the best of her ability, no matter who doubted her. It was clear that her training and experience were far more valuable than any insults thrown her way. The elderly woman's condition was stabilizing, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Maya allowed herself a small breath of relief. She had saved a life, and nothing, no matter what anyone said, could take that away from her. Maya had successfully stabilized the elderly woman, but the atmosphere on the plane was far from calm. She could feel the weight of the passengers' gazes on her, many of them whispering among themselves. Some were clearly relieved, while others still looked uncertain. And then there was Jason, whose eyes remained fixed on her with a cold, almost judgmental stare. Despite the woman's recovery, the tension between them lingered. Jason, still in his first-class seat, leaned forward, his voice just loud enough for a few nearby passengers to hear. "I can't believe someone like her is in charge of a medical emergency," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "It's embarrassing. What if she made a mistake?" Maya's patience was wearing thin. She had just saved a life, yet Jason's words continued to undermine everything she had done. The way he spoke about her, like she was some kind of imposter, hurt more than she cared to admit. The flight attendants, who had watched her work with confidence, seemed to grow more and more uncomfortable with Jason's comments. They had seen her handle the situation with expertise, but there was little they could do to stop the CEO's public criticism. One of the attendants, a young man named Sam, approached Maya. "You did an amazing job, Dr. Johnson," he said quietly. "The woman is doing much better, and we're getting the medical team ready for when we land." Maya smiled at Sam, grateful for his kindness, but she couldn't shake the frustration that still lingered. She glanced over at Jason, who was now texting on his phone, oblivious to the rising tension. "I don't need his approval," she whispered to herself. Maya was used to people doubting her, but it stung more when it came from someone who felt so entitled. She wasn't going to let his words shake her. The woman was stable, and Maya had done what needed to be done. But Jason wasn't finished. As the plane began to descend, he stood up and approached the flight attendants. "Can we get a real doctor on board?" he asked loudly. "This woman clearly doesn't know what she's doing. If she can't handle a simple emergency like this, I wonder how she got that job in the first place." The whole cabin fell quiet. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, but Jason didn't seem to notice. Maya felt her face flush with anger. He had no idea what he was talking about. His words were meant to belittle her, to make her feel small. But Maya wouldn't let him win. She had worked too hard, faced too many challenges to let someone like Jason define her. She turned to the flight attendants, ignoring him completely. "The woman is stable," she said with authority. "She just needs some rest and medical attention when we land. I've done everything I can for now." Jason's face twisted in disbelief. "You're a doctor," he sneered, still not fully convinced. "I've seen doctors in action, and they don't make mistakes like this." Maya remained calm, her voice steady. "I'm the doctor, and I've done what was needed. If you'd like to argue, we can do so when we land." Jason opened his mouth, but before he could respond, a voice from across the cabin spoke up. "Maybe it's time you let it go," a middle-aged woman said, standing from her seat. "This lady just saved a life. Maybe you should show a little respect." Maya felt a rush of gratitude for the woman, whose words cut through the tension in the cabin. The room fell silent for a moment. Jason scowled, clearly not used to being challenged, but he said nothing further. Maya looked around, seeing the approval in the eyes of the other passengers. The situation had turned, and Jason now found himself the target of uncomfortable stares. Maya had earned the respect she deserved, but it wasn't just from the woman she had saved. It was from everyone who had witnessed her strength in that moment. As the flight continued, Maya settled back into her seat, still feeling the weight of the experience. The elderly woman, who had been in critical condition just hours earlier, was now resting peacefully with the help of the oxygen mask. The flight attendants kept a close watch on her, and Maya knew the medical team would be waiting for them when they landed. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. Jason's words still echoed in her mind. Despite his attempts to discredit her, Maya had remained calm, focused, and most importantly, effective. And yet, she had been humiliated in front of everyone, especially by a man who had no understanding of her field or the years she had spent learning and working. It hurt, but Maya was used to facing challenges, and she knew she had done the right thing. A few moments later, the flight attendants returned to thank her again for her efforts. One of them, a young woman named Laura, approached Maya with a grateful smile. "Dr. Johnson, you did a fantastic job. We were all so worried, but you really saved her. Thank you so much." Maya smiled back, appreciating the kindness. "It's part of my job. I just did what I was trained to do," she replied humbly. Maya had always believed that doctors weren't heroes. They were just people who had spent years preparing to help others in their time of need. Laura seemed to sense Maya's exhaustion. "I can't believe what that man said," she continued, her voice lowered so Jason couldn't hear. "You're a hero in my eyes, Dr. Johnson, and I think everyone else on this plane feels the same way." Maya was touched, though she didn't want to make a big deal of it. "Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that." Just then, Jason stood up again, this time making his way toward the bathroom. He glanced at Maya as he passed, but she didn't look up. She didn't need to engage with him anymore. The woman had been saved, and the situation had calmed. That was enough. But as Jason walked by, he couldn't resist one last comment. "You really should learn your place," he muttered just loud enough for Maya to hear. Not everyone appreciates someone pretending to be a doctor. Maya's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. She knew there was no point in responding. He wasn't worth her time. Instead, She focused on the patient, who was still unconscious but breathing steadily. The flight attendants continued to monitor her, and soon the flight began its descent into the city where the medical team would take over. As the plane landed and the seatbelt signs flickered off, Maya gathered her belongings. The elderly woman, now stable, was gently escorted off the plane by the crew, who continued to express their thanks to Maya. She had done what she came to do, and now it was time to go. But as Maya stood up, ready to leave, one of the passengers from earlier approached her. It was the woman who had defended Maya when Jason had spoken out earlier. She smiled warmly at Maya. "You were amazing," the woman said. "You didn't just save a life. You showed everyone in this cabin what real strength looks like. Don't let people like him make you doubt yourself." Maya smiled, feeling a bit of the weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. "It means more than you know." As Maya walked down the aisle, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. Jason's words had stung, but they no longer mattered. What mattered was that the woman was safe, and that was enough. The plane finally touched down, and the passengers began to gather their belongings, the usual post-flight rush of activity filling the cabin. Maya sat in her seat for a moment, closing her eyes and letting out a long, steadying breath. The adrenaline that had kept her moving through the emergency was starting to wear off, and she felt the exhaustion settle in her bones. But despite the physical fatigue, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. The elderly woman had made it through, thanks to her quick actions. The flight attendants, still keeping a close eye on the patient, exchanged grateful glances with Maya as they prepared to help her off the plane. As the doors opened and the passengers began to exit, the medical team was already standing by, ready to take over. The woman would be in good hands from here on out. Maya had done what was needed, and she had done it well. Jason, however, remained in his seat. Maya didn't even glance his way as she made her way down the aisle, but she could feel his eyes on her, as though he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. He had been wrong. He had tried to undermine her, to make her feel less than. But in the end, it had been her knowledge, her calm demeanor, and her ability to act under pressure that had saved the day. The thought of Jason's earlier comments made Maya's blood boil, but she refused to let them cloud the sense of pride that came with knowing she had done the right thing. She had saved a life, and no one, especially not someone like him, could take that away from her. Just as she was about to step off the plane, a voice called out to her from behind. "Dr. Johnson, wait up." Maya turned to see Laura, the young flight attendant, hurrying down the aisle toward her. Laura's face was bright with appreciation. "Thank you for everything you did," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You were incredible back there. I can't imagine how hard that must have been, but you kept it together, and you helped save that woman's life." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of the day lifting just a little bit. "It's what I do. I'm just glad she's okay." Laura shook her head. "No, it was more than that. You stayed calm. You knew exactly what to do. You're a true professional." Maya nodded, grateful for the compliment, but still focused on the bigger picture. "We all did what we could. I couldn't have done it without the crew. They were right there with me." As the medical team escorted the elderly woman off the plane, Maya felt a small weight lifting from her shoulders. She had done what was needed. She had saved a life, and now she could walk away knowing that she had made a difference. Maya had been used to doubters in her career, but this experience was different. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about standing up for what she knew was right. And it was about the lesson that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to simply keep moving forward, even when others try to tear you down. Before Maya stepped into the terminal, Laura spoke again. "One last thing, Dr. Johnson. You have no idea how much you've inspired everyone on this flight. Don't let people like him make you question your worth. You're a hero." Maya smiled softly. "Thank you, Laura. That means more than you know." As she walked away, her head held high, Maya felt a sense of peace. She had done her best, and in the end, that was enough. As the plane taxied to the gate, Maya took one final glance at the elderly woman, now awake and surrounded by the medical team. The once faint, labored breaths had become steady and strong. Her color had returned, and her eyes were alert, although still a bit confused. Maya allowed herself a small, quiet breath of relief. The woman was stable, and Maya's job was done. The medical team, a group of skilled paramedics and doctors waiting at the gate, were ready to take over. As the cabin door opened and the plane began to empty, they immediately began moving the woman onto a stretcher, but they paused for a moment to give Maya a grateful nod. She smiled back and watched as the team carried her off the plane, ready to provide further care. Maya could feel a sense of accomplishment flood her, but it was quickly replaced by a growing sense of exhaustion. Her mind and body had been running on adrenaline since the moment the woman had collapsed. Maya gathered her things, the weight of her medical bag now heavier than ever. She'd done her part, but still, there was a slight heaviness in her chest. Despite the relief of knowing the woman was safe, the sting of Jason's earlier comments still lingered in her thoughts. He hadn't even bothered to apologize. He hadn't offered any sign of respect for her work. In fact, even now, he remained seated in first class, his eyes glued to his phone, seemingly uninterested in what had just occurred. As Maya made her way down the aisle, she glanced over at him, hoping that maybe he would offer at least a nod of recognition for what she had done. But no such gesture came. Instead, he sat with an air of indifference, as though nothing had happened. It was almost as if he was too proud to acknowledge that someone he had so publicly criticized had, in the end, saved a life. Maya let out a soft sigh, but she didn't let herself dwell on it. She had more important things to focus on, things that mattered more than Jason Reed and his misplaced arrogance. As she reached the exit, one of the flight attendants, Laura, approached her with a warm smile. "You were amazing," Laura said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "I can't even begin to tell you how impressed I am by how you handled everything. That woman is alive because of you." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of the day lifting, even if just a little. "Thank you, Laura. But it was a team effort. We all worked together." Laura nodded but insisted. "Still, it was you who took control. You kept everyone calm. You saved her life." Maya felt a warmth in her chest at Laura's words. It was one thing to help someone and know that you had done your best, but it was another to hear someone acknowledge the effort and see it for what it was. It wasn't just about saving a life. It was about being present in the moment, staying composed, and doing what was necessary, even when things were uncertain. Before Maya could respond, another passenger, a man from the economy section, approached her. "I just wanted to thank you," he said. "You did something incredible up there. You didn't let anyone stop you, and you saved her life. Thank you." Maya smiled, feeling a surge of warmth and pride. She nodded, her voice steady but soft. "Thank you. It was the right thing to do." The small group of passengers who had witnessed the situation unfold continued to express their gratitude, some even clapping lightly as Maya made her way off the plane. For a moment, the noise of the terminal faded, and Maya allowed herself to truly feel the impact of her actions. It wasn't about the recognition or praise. It was about knowing that in that moment, she had done everything she could. As Maya walked toward the baggage claim, she realized something important. People like Jason could say whatever they wanted, but in the end, her actions spoke louder than any insult. She had saved a life, and that was what mattered. Maya stepped off the plane, feeling a quiet sense of pride settle in her chest. The elderly woman was in good hands now, and Maya's role in saving her life was over. But as she moved through the terminal, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something still hung in the air. Despite everything, there was the memory of Jason's harsh words, and the weight of his dismissive attitude lingered. As Maya walked toward the baggage claim area, she could see people around her moving with the usual post-flight routine. Some were tired, some were excited, but she could feel the eyes of others on her. She had handled a life-or-death situation, with grace and professionalism, and somehow that seemed to stand out. The quiet respect from some passengers was all she needed. Just then, she saw Laura again, standing near the exit, looking as though she was waiting for someone. The young flight attendant waved and rushed over. "Dr. Johnson," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I just wanted to say again how amazing you were back there. You stayed calm, and you did what needed to be done. I don't know how you kept your cool with all that going on, especially with that man." Maya smiled, grateful for Laura's kindness. "Thank you, Laura. It wasn't easy, but I've been through a lot of intense situations before. You just have to focus." Laura nodded. "Still, it's impressive. I'm sure everyone on this flight is talking about it. You really stood your ground." Maya felt a sense of warmth in her chest. "It's just what I do. I'm just glad the woman's going to be okay." Before Maya could say more, she heard a voice behind her. A man from the flight, one of the passengers who had witnessed the whole situation, stepped forward with a kind smile. "I just wanted to say thank you too," he said. "You were incredible up there. You saved that woman's life in front of all of us. I don't think anyone expected you to handle it the way you did, especially with the way things started." Maya turned to face the man, giving him a polite smile. "It was my job. I just did what anyone would have done in that situation." He shook his head. "No, it wasn't just your job. It was your calm and quick thinking. You're the reason she's still alive." Maya appreciated the compliment, but she didn't want to focus on herself. She had done what was necessary in the moment, but now it was time to move forward. She nodded at the man and thanked him, then continued to make her way to the baggage claim. But just as she reached the carousel, Maya noticed Jason again. He was standing near the entrance, his back straight, and face still holding that air of superiority. She had hoped he would be long gone by now, but it seemed he was still lingering, perhaps watching her or just waiting for his luggage. Maya could feel his gaze on her from across the room. His earlier comments hadn't gone unnoticed, but now, after everything that had happened, Maya felt no fear. She had already shown him her strength by saving a life. Jason's eyes briefly met hers, and for a moment, Maya thought he might say something. But then, without a word, he turned his attention back to his phone, his expression unchanged. It was almost as if nothing had happened. Maya sighed softly. She wasn't going to waste any more energy thinking about him. His opinion didn't matter. What mattered was that she had helped, that she had done her best in a high-pressure situation. And the best part was that she didn't need anyone's approval to know that. As the luggage began to arrive, Maya reached for her bag, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. She had faced adversity and come out stronger. She didn't need to explain herself or prove anything to anyone. The respect she had earned, even from the passengers who had witnessed everything, was enough for her. Maya walked toward the exit, her head held high. She had done something truly meaningful, and that was all that mattered. The next morning, the news of the emergency on the plane spread quickly. Passengers had shared their stories, and soon, social media was buzzing with praise for the calm, composed doctor who had stepped up to save a life. Maya had never expected this level of attention, but it didn't surprise her either. She had seen how quickly things could escalate when people came together in difficult situations. The people on that plane had witnessed her skill, but what truly stood out to them was her ability to remain calm under pressure. As Maya sipped her coffee at a small cafe near the airport, her phone buzzed. A message popped up from an old friend, Sarah, a fellow doctor who had worked with her in the past. "Hey Maya, I just saw the news about the flight. You're all over social media. I'm so proud of you." Maya smiled, feeling a wave of warmth at Sarah's words. "It was just another day at work," she replied, keeping it humble as always. But Sarah's reply was quick. "No, Maya. You did something incredible. People like you don't come around often. You saved a life when no one else could. And you did it with grace. That deserves recognition." Maya paused for a moment, taking in Sarah's words. Grace. She hadn't thought about it that way, But now that Sarah mentioned it, Maya realized how much of that moment had been about staying composed, about leading with calm authority in the face of uncertainty. Maya had always prided herself on being the kind of doctor who kept a level head, even when the pressure was on. She didn't just save lives with her hands, she saved them with her presence. Later that day, Maya was contacted by a news outlet. They had heard about her actions and wanted to feature her in a segment about healthcare professionals who go above and beyond in emergency situations. Maya wasn't sure at first if she was ready for the attention, but her colleagues encouraged her to share her story. It was a reminder that, in a world where stories of negativity and conflict often dominate the headlines, there was still room for something inspiring. The interview was scheduled for the next day, and Maya found herself preparing not just for the questions about the medical emergency, but also for what came next, how she would share her thoughts on her profession, the people she served, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She wasn't just a doctor in that moment on the plane. She was someone who understood the importance of compassion, even in the most stressful of circumstances. As the interview unfolded, Maya found herself talking about more than just the emergency. She spoke about the value of teamwork, the strength of staying calm, and the importance of every individual on a medical team, from the flight attendants to the paramedics waiting on the ground. But most importantly, Maya spoke about grace. "You can't always control the circumstances," she said during the interview, "but you can control how you respond to them. I've learned that over the years. In my work, I've seen everything. And the one thing that always makes a difference is staying grounded. People trust you when you lead with calmness and compassion. It's not just about the skills, it's about the heart behind them." The interviewer nodded, clearly impressed by her words. Maya knew that what she said would resonate with many. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about sharing something meaningful with the world. The segment aired later that week, and Maya received countless messages from people all over the world. Doctors, nurses, patients, and even strangers who had watched the story unfold. The messages weren't about how heroic she was, but about how her actions had inspired others to remain calm and help in times of crisis. As Maya read through the messages, she felt a sense of peace. The story had reached people in a way she hadn't expected, and it was teaching something far bigger than just how to handle an emergency. It was teaching about kindness, grace, and the strength of staying true to yourself, no matter the challenges you face. Maya realized that the lesson in grace wasn't just for the people who had witnessed her work on the plane. It was a lesson for herself, too. She had learned that no matter how hard the world might get, keeping your heart in the right place would always lead to something greater than you expected. The days following the flight incident were a blur of messages, interviews, and unexpected attention. Maya had never sought the spotlight, but now it seemed to follow her. News outlets had shared her story, and many people reached out to offer their support, both from the medical community and the general public. Maya had never imagined that one moment of action could cause such a ripple effect. Despite the media coverage, Maya remained grounded. She continued with her normal routine, working at the hospital and attending to her patients. But now, there was a subtle shift in the way people viewed her. The respect she had always earned from her colleagues seemed to deepen. They saw her not just as a doctor, but as someone who embodied the qualities they all admired: calm under pressure, a deep sense of empathy, and unwavering professionalism. One morning, Maya walked into the hospital to find a small group of nurses gathered near the entrance. They were talking quietly, but as soon as they saw her, they broke into smiles. One of them, Sarah, waved her over. "Dr. Johnson, we've all been talking," Sarah said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've inspired so many of us. The way you handled everything on that flight, the way you stayed calm and focused. It's a reminder of what we're all capable of, no matter what we face." Maya smiled warmly, feeling a sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah. It wasn't easy, but we all rise to the occasion when needed. I couldn't have done it alone. It's the people around us who make a difference." The nurses nodded in agreement, clearly touched by Maya's humility. They all respected her, not just because of her skills, but because of her kindness and leadership. Maya had always believed that leadership came from showing up, doing the work, and treating everyone with respect. As the days went on, Maya received a letter in the mail. It was from the elderly woman she had helped on the flight. The letter was handwritten, and it expressed the deepest gratitude for Maya's care. The woman wrote about how she had been terrified at first, unsure of whether she would make it. But Maya's calmness, her steady hands, and the way she had reassured her brought her comfort in her most vulnerable moment. "I will never forget you," the letter ended. "You saved my life, and I will always be grateful." Maya read the letter quietly, her heart swelling with emotion. She had done what any doctor would have done, but this note was a reminder that her actions had touched someone deeply. It wasn't just about saving lives. It was about giving people hope in their darkest moments. Later that week, Maya received a call from a medical organization. They wanted her to speak at an upcoming conference about leadership in healthcare. The offer came as a surprise, but Maya felt honored. She had always been passionate about teaching and sharing her knowledge, and now she had an opportunity to inspire others in a new way. As she prepared for her talk, Maya reflected on the lessons she had learned over the past few weeks. She realized that no matter the challenges she faced, the most important thing was to stay true to her values. She had faced doubt and negativity, yet her actions had spoken louder than any words could. She had proven that true leadership wasn't about power or recognition. It was about serving others with grace and compassion. The day of the conference, Maya stood before a large audience of doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals. She spoke passionately about the importance of staying calm under pressure, of always putting patients first, and of the power of empathy. Her story of the flight emergency was just one example of how healthcare professionals could make a difference in ways they never expected. As she finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. Maya smiled, humbled by the recognition. But inside, she knew that this was just the beginning. The real reward came from knowing she had made an impact, not just on the woman she had helped on the plane, but on every person she had worked with, taught, and inspired. Maya's journey was far from over. The world still needed doctors who cared deeply, who acted with integrity, and who led with kindness. And Maya was ready for whatever came next, knowing that every step she took would be guided by her values and her unwavering commitment to making a difference.